Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second installment of our Remote Working Resources webinar series. My name is Craig Stoneha. I am the president of Laughing Rock Technology. On the call with me today is Tyler McCulley, our business development manager, as well as Philip Ionicone, our Office 365 specialist. So we do have some specific goals with this webinar series. I just want to hit those real quick for you. First and foremost, we want to make it extremely clear that at no point are we trying to sell anyone anything or push any particular product. Our primary focus on these webinar entries, these webinar series, is education, taking a look at the global conditions, taking a look at what's happening right now, evaluating the work from home situation that we all find ourselves in, and figuring out best practices and best technologies to use to make ourselves efficient and to be the best companies we can be as we're shifting basically in real time. So why are we worthy of having webinars that people should listen to? Well, at least for this one, when it comes to Microsoft Office and when it comes to Microsoft in general, we have been a partner for over 2 decades at either the silver or the gold tier status with them. We have been involved with Office 365 since its inception. We are certified Office 365 engineers. I myself am a certified Microsoft engineer. And we have thousands of users under management under our umbrella in our Office 365 environment, as well as hundreds and hundreds of tenants. So we've got plenty of experience and we have tons of resources with our Microsoft partnership that allows us to stay up to date on information, stay trained, and stay current. So we try to bring some of that information to you through these webinars. Our agenda through this thing is we're going to keep it quick. We're going to try to fly through some stuff here. A lot of it's going to be top level. But first, we want to hit on Office 365 itself. Where did it come from? What's the purpose? What's the goal here from Microsoft's standpoint? What are they trying to provide? And what are the advantages to you? Key applications. This thing's a monster. It's got a ton of apps inside of it. So we want to hit on some of the more popular ones, some of the ones that might interest universally everyone on this call. And then, we'll touch on some additional ones as well. But if you have any specific questions on apps, you can always hit us offline and we can address them directly. Licensing. So we absolutely want to touch on licensing. Anybody here who has any experience with Microsoft knows that they go out of their way to make licensing as convoluted and confusing as possible. But we think we can kind of break this down in a very simplified manner here today and at least give you an idea of what you should be looking at in an Office 365 cloud environment to try to get yourself what you need to make sure that you're set up properly. And then finally, we're gonna drill a little deeper into Teams, just because it's clearly become the primary focus for Microsoft from a collaboration standpoint, and we want to make sure that we're giving all that information to you guys. We are going to be taking questions throughout the webinar, so please feel free to post them in the meeting chat in the bottom right of your screen, and Phil and Tyler will be collating those, get them together, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So let's get started here. First, let's talk a little bit about Microsoft Office 365. So anybody in business or even at home, and you know the name Microsoft, we've all been using their products for decades. But about 10 years ago, they kind of found themselves in a pickle. The cloud started taking off. Competitors started getting into it. Apple was developing iCloud. Google was developing the cloud. And Microsoft had nothing. So their problem was that they had tons and tons and tons of customers, but nothing was streamlined. Everybody was on different platforms. And probably a lot of you even saw this at your offices. Maybe some users were on Office 2007, some were on Office 2010, some on 2013. That lack of consistency made it very difficult for them to kind of run streamlined operations for collaboration, to kind of release software platforms that everyone could use because everyone had different software. So they developed this primary objective of having a dynamic platform, dynamic business platform for real-time efficiency for organizations. So, and the goals, and I think they hit them all pretty well, was to make sure it was continually updated. They wanted to make sure new features were automatically being added, that everybody was running the same version of the software, and that the same platform was used globally so that everybody's stuff could talk. They also wanted to get unified communication in there. I mean, kudos to them for realizing that video chat, texting, and text chat and everything else and conference calling was going to be a big part of the future of collaboration, even in Office. So those were the goals. So they had to work this through. They had to make a paradigm shift. So they did this in a couple of different ways, and some of these are directly relevant to adoption for you guys because they matter in how they approach this so that you can kind of see where your value comes from. First, they did a carrot and a stick strategy here because they realized that their biggest problem was also their biggest strength was also their biggest weakness, which was this huge adoption of multiple different platforms. So they first had to deal with incentivizing people to make the switch. Biggest benefit to you, they priced this thing aggressively. Considering everything that is on this cloud platform for business, the fact that you can get a tenant set up and get your company on for as little as $4 per user per month is insane. And if you look at other cloud software providers out there, you've got Adobe, you've got AutoCAD, you've got all these softwares out there that are charging $100, $200, $300 per user per month. And Microsoft is coming in at $4 to start. The pricing is amazing. And even if you look at that $4 doesn't include the Office apps, but even if you look at the Office apps, if you compare it to actually upgrading Microsoft Office on a regular upgrade schedule, which they recommend every 3 years, it's actually cost neutral, or you save money going to Office 365 versus just buying Microsoft Office by itself on a regular basis. And plus, they throw everything else in with it. So they did a great job at the pricing, and that's worth noting, especially if you're looking to make a change. They also made it highly flexible. So, and I'm still amazed after years of working with this platform how flexible they made it. The monthly billing option is great. It allows you to treat it as an operating cost as a business. So you've got that. You can actually increase and decrease licenses on a monthly basis. So you're not buying it annually or biannually or anything like that. You can control your costs monthly. They allow you to mix and match licenses. It's not a one size fits all. You don't have to pick a license type for all your users. You can have admins and part-timers be on maybe a business essentials license. You can have standard users, power users, whatever, being on business premium, and maybe executives on enterprise level. And they'll all live happily together within your tenant. So they give you a lot of flexibility in choosing your licensing. So they give you a lot of flexibility in installations. You can do 5 installs per license. We'll get into that more later, but that is more than enough for almost all users. And they give you a ton of value in the additional software that they put into the platform on top of the standard Office 365 stuff, which we'll get into later as well. And that's the carrot. They also did the stick. So they are actively shirking away from support on purchased software. So if you have purchased software, expect them to start limiting updates. They're not really going to be releasing anything other than security updates anymore. They are not really taking support calls, even if you own the license. They've kind of shut down support on it. They are phasing out individual licensing. So if you are not on Office 365 yet and you are still running purchased versions of Microsoft Office, you really want to start thinking about getting away from that. If nothing else, just because they're trying to go out of their way to make it unattractive to stay there. So they're going to continually decentivize you from using that. And finally, the one big last thing, and it's not really relevant here, but I'm going to mention it, is there's no competition in the market right now. Nobody else is doing this. Apple decided to focus on individual users. Google basically exited the market. We haven't seen an update in their platform in 5 years. And there's nobody else. And so from a business collaboration cloud platform standpoint, this is the only game in town. So to be able to get it inexpensively and for all the things that they're offering as incentives, it really does kind of make itself a great, easy to adopt solution. So enough about that. Let's jump into the key applications. So if you're going to talk about Office 365, got to talk about hosted Exchange. Hosted Exchange has been around for a while in some form or another, and many of you may have been running Exchange servers at your own offices at one point or another, so you might have some familiarity with this, but essentially Exchange is email. That's what it is. It's Outlook. It's email, calendars, contacts, tasks, all that stuff that we're all used to in an Outlook environment. So this is the core of the entire Office 365 here, is still email. That basic plan that I talked about before for $4 a month, that is an email plan. That gives you access to Outlook Online. It gives you the ability to have a domain in your Office 365 environment and to use their mail system. So For anybody that doesn't know what Exchange brings to the table, um, it's a phenomenal platform, but in almost every way, the Exchange Online, the hosted Exchange that Microsoft offers, is better than anything you can buy and put in-house. And that's mainly because they give you a tremendous amount of flexibility in how you can use their platform without adding costs. So you have groups, and this is in the cloud version. Now, you do have groups in the on-premise version, but the groups in the cloud version tie into everything else. So your Exchange groups allow you to put together maybe an accounting group or maybe an operations or a sales group or whatever within your email environment, but that can also apply then to Teams. It can apply to SharePoint. It can apply to your Active Directory online. So all of these things are tied together to make it a unified platform. They give you free aliases. So if you have multiple email addresses or if you have multiple domains and you want to have multiple email addresses, they don't charge you anything for it. You can just set up the aliases and it's included. There's no fee. And they also do something that I think is very, very cool. They offer a thing called shared mailboxes. And for anybody that's never heard of this, um, these are essentially fully featured mailboxes that you don't have to pay for, which boggles my mind that Microsoft would do this, but we'll take it. So some of the advantages of a shared mailbox or some of the uses of a shared mailbox would be if you have like an accounting box or if you have a marketing box or an info at something like that. Instead of just having it be a forward, you can actually set it up as its own mailbox. You can send from it. You can share it with your other teammates. You can log into it and use it as its own standalone mailbox. It does everything a mailbox does, but it's free. The other real advantage to a shared mailbox is in the event that you have, let's say, turnover. So let's say, Jane decides to leave and you hire a replacement John. Well, you want to set John up with his own email, but you also want to keep Jane's email box in play and you don't want to pay for two licenses. Well, that's fine. You convert Jane over to a shared mailbox. That releases the license that was tied to her. You still have access to the mailbox. It is still functional and you can get all the information, but you can take her old license and apply it to John. You're net neutral on your cost, but now you have two mailboxes and you've achieved your goal of running both. So there's a lot of flexibility within the online platform that they're not nickel and diming you, which is huge. Also within the Exchange environment, the calendar app is worth mentioning as a separate item just because it is a part of Outlook, but the calendars also tie into everything else. So you'll notice when we get into the Teams section later in the webinar, you'll see the calendar in there. And you can schedule with your other apps from within your Outlook calendar. So you can schedule a Teams web call from your calendar. You can schedule, lots of different things from your calendar. So we don't need to get into that too deep, but it's worth mentioning. Also, when we're talking about all the apps, we can't move forward without talking about the classic apps. And these are included at, I believe the base would be the Microsoft Office 365 business plan, where you got your Word, your Excel, your PowerPoint, your Outlook, your Publisher, your Access. All of these things are still there. You can either run them on the cheaper versions of the app, the cheaper versions of the platform. You can run them online, or as you go into the standard tier, you can run them as standard desktop apps. In almost every way, they are better than anything you've probably used as a purchase app because they're regularly updated. And as features are released, they're automatically integrated. So you will see, if you're on the Office 365 applications, updates within your apps from day to day as they get released because they get pushed down in real time. So you're not waiting for your next upgrade that you have to pay for to get new features and releases. It's just in there. Another app that's included that we questions on that to bring up, but we're going to bring it up anyway, is OneNote. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but if you've never used OneNote, give it a try. OneNote on Microsoft Office 365 is a tremendously useful application only because it syncs so well. So I don't know if any of you are like me, but you have a thought at, right before you go to bed, maybe you send yourself an email or maybe you put a note on your phone, whatever. If you put it in OneNote, when you get into the office the next day, it's on your computer. When you grab your laptop in the morning, it's on your laptop. When you grab your tablet, it's on your tablet. Your notes are all tied together. And this application helps you organize them. So if you've never tried it, take a look. It's a really neat app. And I do recommend it. So back into the huge apps, outside of just the desktop apps, we can't really talk about Office 365 without talking about SharePoint. And this is SharePoint Online. Really, SharePoint should have its own webinar, but we haven't planned it yet. Actually, Tyler hasn't written it yet, and I haven't taken credit for it. So we're just gonna pop it in here real quick and talk about it briefly. So SharePoint Online, this is not your father's SharePoint. So many of you may remember SharePoint as a server application, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and it worked great, and a lot of companies used it. What they did was they took that application from the servers and they basically reformatted the entire thing and turned it into a cloud-based application. This thing, in many ways, is the heart and soul of Office 365. So for those of you who don't know what SharePoint is, it's a lot of things. One of the things it is it allows you to build individual websites for each team. So, and when I say team, you'll see on this slide that Tyler pulled up here, that we've got an example site here from our network that has a customers team, a sales team, a marketing team, an office team. We basically set up a lot of our teams by department. Each one of these would have its own intranet site so that the accounting department can privately and securely communicate about accounting topics within their own intranet site. They can have chats, they can post information to web pages back and forth to each other, and they can publish it publicly if it seems relevant. You can also set up SharePoint sites for the entire organization, a true intranet site where it links back to these other team sites. So it gives you this entire easy to manage internal website thing where you can tie these into your email, tie these into your filing system, tie it into everything you're using in real time. So that's the forward facing part of this. Behind the scenes, it is also a fully fledged online file server. So if you're currently running a Windows server that uses a file server at your office, or if you're running a NAS at your office that you use for file serving, this can do that. You simply do a migration, move all of your files up to the web, set up your permissions like you would on a local network, apply it to the teams that are appropriate, and bang, you now have your entire filing structure built up on the cloud, accessible from anywhere in the world. And not only is it accessible through the web portal and through the traditional apps, but they even have given you the ability to tie it right into your Windows Explorer, just like a map drive. So even though it's living off on the cloud, you can treat it like it's right there on your own local network. So it's a phenomenal platform, really is one of the base platforms for this entire system. And it works in conjunction with OneDrive for Business, which OneDrive for Business is also fantastic. So there really is no limitation on teams, and there's really no limitation on storage within teams. That said, there is only so much you get included. So a standard Teams deployment, SharePoint deployment, I'm sorry, I keep saying Teams, the standard SharePoint deployment would include 1 terabyte of storage for your tenant, which is your organization, and then an additional 10 gigs per user. So if you had 20 users, you would have 1.2 terabytes online. If you needed more than that, no problem. You would just have to purchase additional storage with Microsoft. But they do give quite a hefty amount upfront, and we don't really have a lot of organizations that are purchasing storage space. They also allow you to do hybrid setups. And we do have quite a few that do this. So they keep maybe, let's say, mission critical information up in their SharePoint environment, and they use that as their primary filing structure. But maybe they keep a NAS or a Windows file server at their office for long-term storage or archived information. So this allows you to not have to buy additional storage online, but still maintain all of the advantages of a work from home environment because all your mission critical stuff is out on the cloud. Microsoft doesn't care. Obviously, in a perfect world, they would prefer that you run everything on their network. But if you want to tie them together, tie them together. There's really no limitation there or no punishment for doing that. So our recommendation is definitely move in that direction. And if you are thinking about going to the cloud, this is one of the first conversations you should be having with whoever your consultant is. You want to be talking about SharePoint and specifically SharePoint's file structure and filing system capabilities. From a work from home standpoint, a couple other things worth mentioning is within SharePoint, you do have the real-time collaboration on files, which is huge. It gives you the ability to work on a single file simultaneously with unlimited users, so that if you're working on an Excel document, you can not only edit it at the same time as someone else, but you can see what they're doing within that file. It allows you to connect your network directly to your cloud network. once you have the Azure Active Directory in place so that you can actually have a single sign-on for both Office 365 and your local network and all your devices. So there's a ton of advantages here. And then when you're talking about the files themselves, there is some really great file access security as well. So they give you a lot of control over permissioning. They give you a lot of control over browser access, things like that. And they even allow you to sync your SharePoint sites down to local folders. So you've got quite a robust cloud-based file system that is, for all intents and purposes, included. And there's really no upcharge for this. This is all part of the Office 365 environment. So this is just there. Just a matter of whether or not you have it set up and whether you're utilizing it. All right, that's enough on SharePoint. Let's move on. Next, we've got chat features. So while this isn't really a standalone app, it's actually a component within Teams. We mention it because this is a replacement. A lot of people maybe have a Slack application, or maybe they have some sort of third-party app they're using for chat. In our opinion, the chat features within Teams stack up against any of those, and in a lot of ways might even be superior. So it is absolutely worth taking a look at moving away from the third-party apps and just having it all in one place. And we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get into Teams. And then there's additional applications that are just there for you to use. Now, some of these are included, some of these might be an additional fee, but there's so many of them, it's hard to even kind of express how much software is available from Microsoft. And just a couple of good examples would be Microsoft Project or Microsoft Planner. These are project management softwares. There's Microsoft Dynamics, which can be plugged right into your environment, which is a CRM software. There's Microsoft Flow, which helps you manage information traffic through your network. So there's just tons and tons of software that comes from Microsoft that's a part of the platform. Not only is there software that's a part of the platform, there's also plugins. So if you get into the Teams environment and you get into the Office 365 environment, you will see that there is just hundreds and hundreds of third-party softwares that you can just plug right in. So for example, let's say you use Zoom and you like Zoom and you know that Teams is going to have video conferencing, but you don't want to give up your Zoom. The Zoom works well and everybody knows you on it. Well, then that's fine. Just go out to the Microsoft App Store, grab Zoom, plug it into your Teams, and now you can use Zoom right within Teams. Now, you still have to have a valid Zoom subscription in order to plug it in and have it work properly, but you no longer have to switch applications. You can now plug Zoom into your Teams. You can plug WebEx into your Teams environment. You can plug Constant Contact, SurveyMonkey, all sorts of CRM tools like Salesforce.com can all just plug right in. You have one place to work on all these softwares, along with all the other softwares that you're already working on within the Microsoft environment. So it's essentially an app store for business. And as far as I know, all of it is free. So you just grab the app and plug it in, and we are seeing apps being added almost daily. Everybody is fighting and clawing to get their stuff on the Teams app because it's the largest business platform there is. So everybody wants to be a part of it. So that's it on that. Let's jump into one of my favorite topics, which is security. So security is always one of those things that nobody really wants to talk about it, but it's wildly important. Microsoft did a great job with this in the sense that they built this thing from the top down. So when they were looking at their user base, they decided to build the entire application set for Fortune 500 companies and then strip it down for companies that don't need all those features. So what that means is natively out of the box, this thing is HIPAA compliant. Natively out of the box, this thing is PCI compliant. On day one of installation, it is financial industry compliant. They have put in all the tools that you need. Now, they may not be active right off the bat. You might have to go ahead and set up the tools that you need, and you want to make sure you're on the right licensing level. So when it comes to security and compliancy, you absolutely want to make sure you're working with a consultant. And there is sometimes configuration involved depending on your industry to make sure you are set up properly for your industry's needs. But that said, we have gotten confirmation from all sorts of compliancy organizations in the federal government that have all signed off on Office 365 as a perfectly acceptable solution. So it takes away that question of, am I going to get myself in trouble here for data management? Your data management is already certified as compliant from Office 365, from the agency's standpoints, because they're working with Microsoft. So that's for the security and the compliancy component. What about backups? Well, backups is a different story. So, and this is a big misconception within the entire cloud world, is that, oh, I'm on the cloud, I must be backed up. Unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, if you're on the cloud, you are not being backed up. Most cloud organizations will actively tell you, and I know Microsoft even puts it in their service agreement, that we're not backing your stuff up. You are on your own here. We recommend you get your own backup solution because that's not our bag. It's not what we do. So now, that said, there is redundancy. So they do protect your data. They do have multiple data centers. They do make sure that your stuff is secure and that it is being replicated across multiple locations. But if you were to call Microsoft and say, "Hey, I deleted an Excel spreadsheet 5 weeks ago. Can you pull it up and restore it?" They'll probably just hang up on you. They don't do backups, and they definitely don't do restores, even if they have backups. So there are plenty of options out there, and all of them that we've seen work fantastic for backing up Office 365. And most of the time, what we would recommend in an Office 365 backup scenario is focus on your mission critical stuff. So maybe your front office staff doesn't need to be backed up because they're not storing anything in their OneDrive that's business related, and maybe their emails are not in a disastrous situation. Their emails being lost wouldn't cripple the company, but maybe you have some executives that no matter what, you have to have a backup of their emails. You have to make sure that their OneDrive files are backed up, and their stuff is mission critical. So you should be able to work with, when you're talking to your partners, you want to work with a backup solution that will allow you to implement backups piecemeal. It shouldn't be an all or nothing situation, unless it's a one fee for your entire organization, which is not common, but they do exist. But if it's a per user thing, it should be allowed to be deployed granularly based on who needs it and leave others off. Also, you want to make sure you're backing up your SharePoint. We've seen this mistake being made by other organizations where they think they're backed up because their mailboxes are backed up, but SharePoint wasn't included. In our opinion, SharePoint is almost the most critical thing to have backed up because that's where your files live. So you want to make sure you're getting real-time backups on a real-time backup schedule with a good long retention. All right, enough on that. After backups, we've got licensing. Oh, yeah, I know. Everybody's excited to talk about licensing. So that's why we made it fun. So licensing with Microsoft, anytime you deal with Microsoft, is just a mess. So what we try to do is we tried to organize it in a little bit more of a reasonable method that's easy to understand. So we broke it into 4 tiers. So the first tier, which we call the basic tier, is essentially just get your foot in the door. So these products are generally not what we see as the main products that organizations use, but these products are almost universally used by all organizations in some way. And the 2 products we threw into that category are Exchange Online, which is really just email, and Business Essentials, which Business Essentials is the first level of Microsoft Office 365 products that include SharePoint Online storage and the web apps. It doesn't include the downloadable apps that you can install on your computer, but it does include the web apps, so you can open up a Word doc or an Excel doc or a PowerPoint presentation in a browser. So that'll get you going. Those apps are acceptable, but most organizations are going to find themselves using the value apps. And again, these are our terms. Microsoft would never sign off on this. The value tier, we put 2 products in there. One is Microsoft Business, which Microsoft Business is no email, no SharePoint, none of that. It is just the desktop apps. So if you find yourself in a situation, let's say you have an Exchange server and you're not ready to shift over to Office 365 for email yet, but you do realize that you have a major problem with licenses being way out of date and having licenses from the last decade all over the place and no consistency, and you want to at least get your Office software consistent for all users, this Microsoft Business will get you there. You can use that as a software purchasing option, and it's very inexpensive. Then we go to the next one in the value tier, which is Business Premium. In my opinion, Office 365 Business Premium is kind of the staple of the Office 365 world. Here's where you get everything people expect. You're going to get your email. You're going to get your desktop apps, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Excel, whatever. I said Excel twice. I'm sorry. You're going to get your online storage. You're going to get your SharePoint. You're going to get your Teams integration. You're going to get your web calling, your chatting. You're going to get all the extra add-on apps. All of it is kind of in there. So that's the one we see the most of. And then we move on to tier 3, which is the enterprise tier. Now, in the enterprise tier, you're usually looking at the same type of thing that you would see in a business premium, just on steroids. So, maybe in the E series, in the enterprise tier series, you might see all mailboxes are doubled. So you get 100 gigs instead of 50 gigs. But you might see archiving included or compliancy features included by default, or just different specific things. So in these 3 tiers, you want to work with a consultant to figure out what combination you need and in what quantities, because it will make a huge difference. And just as an example, in the enterprise tier, if you were to go with E5 licenses, those things cost, I don't know, like 20 some dollars a piece, maybe $25 a piece. But if you go in the value tier and you go with business premium, those licenses cost $12.50. So they're half the cost. So if you have 20 users at $25, you're looking at $500 a month to go E5. But if you realize that you only have 5 of those users that actually need E5, you can save hundreds of dollars by putting the other 15 on business premium while you put your 5 that actually need the enterprise features on the E5. So that ability to kind of evaluate who needs what and properly position the licensing can save you thousands of dollars over the course of a year, just in making sure you have the right licenses in the right places. And then finally, we have a 4th tier. It's the calling tier. We separated it out because it's kind of independent of all the Office 365 standard products. We went into heavy detail on Office 365 calling in our previous webinar, but for the most part, the calling products can be added to any other Office 365 product. And they allow you to turn your Teams into a phone system. It is a great product. I have no doubt in the next 1 to 3 years, it is going to be a game-changing platform. Currently, it still needs some work. It's not quite mature yet as a calling option, as a phone system replacement option, but it's getting there. So we're going to keep it as a separate tier, just knowing that they're working on it, and eventually this thing's going to be hopefully primo. So like I said, mixing and matching is important. Most organizations do mix and match their licensing. We see it more in the larger organizations. The small organizations, maybe they just all get one, homogeneous platform. But as you get bigger, the mix and matching gives you a ton of options and allows you to kind of choose features. All right, so now let's get into the most exciting part of this entire thing. And as this slide is called, every wheel needs an axle. And in this situation, that axle is Microsoft Teams. I got to be honest, when Teams came out, I didn't really think it was going to be what they said it was going to be. And Microsoft often makes promises that don't really pan out, but they hit a home run with this one. I think in my 20 plus years in IT, I don't think I've ever worked with a program that so dramatically changed my day-to-day operations so quickly as Teams. This is the central hub of activity for all of your Office 365. So they're dragging in your chat, they're dragging in your SharePoint and your file system, they're dragging in your calendar and your invites and everything else. They're bringing in pretty much your calling, your conference calling, your video calling. All of these things are being included into one location. And the application is included in almost every single version of Office 365. So it is a great program that doesn't really cost you anything. It's basically an add-on program that gives you this ability as a user, not as an administrator, but as a user, to kind of see everything in one place. So the collaboration portion of Teams is huge, and it's got some really cool features that are worth mentioning. So the first is the unified chat. So the unified chat feature, this is what I was talking about before, the Slack replacement. And as you can see here in the screenshot, we've got kind of one of our chats up, where you can just see that we've got different people talking to different people or groups of people all over the place. And it does a great job. It's real time on your cell phones, your tablets, your desktops, your laptops. It runs quickly. It allows you all the features you would expect within a chat program, and it's just built right in there with the rest of your stuff. You've got channels. Now, channels are something that we don't see adopted as often as we would like, and I expect them to be adopted more in the future. But what we're talking about with channels here is, and now you'll see here's an example of some teams. So we've got our customers team, sales team, office team, software marketing, whatever. Those are all teams. Underneath those teams, you can add individual channels. So one of the ways that we use channels, just to give you kind of an example of some of their power, is, and I can't expand this because it's a slide, but underneath that projects, you would see a whole bunch of individual projects that are listed there, each one as a channel. We then assign people to that channel. And now we have mini teams within our greater team that can use that channel as a centralized collaboration hub for that project. So they can post files to it, they can post updates to it, they can chat within it, they can call each other from there. They can share files with clients from there. It is this whole little tiny section in the system built just for that one project. So we have seen organizations that set up channels for, maybe they're doing something in HR, maybe they're making a new handbook, and they set up a new handbook channel. And the people in the HR department who are responsible for developing that handbook are now in there collaborating on their own special place. Or, maybe the accounting department's working on new protocols, whatever. The channels are huge. And one of the things that we're expecting in the next quarter is to allow the ability to add permissions to channels so that you can even lock people out. So you can make private channels for just specific things, which would be huge for executives to have, special projects or meetings or whatever. So channels are very cool. We encourage people to get to know them. The video and phone integration. So like I said, this is coming along quite nicely. It still has some work to go, but you can see there are full calling features in here. You can add speed dials. You can call directly from the Teams app, video or phone. You can call groups, and you can even do it right from the chat. So if you're chatting with a group of 3 other people and you realize, nuts to this could be fixed in 5 minutes with a phone call, you just hit the phone call button in the top right corner and bang, it rings all of their devices and sets up a call immediately. So there is some great collaboration features in here from a calling standpoint and from a video standpoint. In-app document collaboration. So this is just fantastic. So we talked earlier about the fact that multiple people can be in the same document or Excel sheet or whatever working simultaneously. But not only can you do it within the same document, you can even open those documents from right within Teams. So you don't even have to leave the Teams app. You can just navigate to that team, go into the file structure, click on that doc, and just start working on it. The Microsoft Office products are integrated into Teams so that you don't have to leave Teams to work on them. Now you will notice even in this slide in the top middle, it says open in desktop app. So if for some reason you need additional features that aren't in Teams, you can pop it out right into the desktop app right from here and just keep plugging along. The other person, if you are collaborating, wouldn't even notice you did it. You can also pin your documents to your own Teams environment. So kind of like in Chrome or in Edge or in some sort of browser where you can have multiple tabs, you can set up tabs in Teams and you can pin docs to those tabs. So now you have a quick access reference to go directly to a specific document right from within Teams. I use this extensively for internal documents that get updated regularly and that we use all the time. It's just a great little tool to be able to pin them. I don't think we have a slide for that, but if anybody has any questions, let us know. We can show you. There's also a built-in wiki. Now, we don't actually use this because we had previously, prior to adopting Teams, built our own wiki. But for anyone that is looking for a wiki solution, this is a great entry-level wiki solution. You can build it right into Teams. You can start keeping instructional documentation or any type of documentation that you need right here within your Teams environment so that you can start building out your own knowledge base. And it really does a decent job. And it's a good little add-on that was kind of a surprise to all of us when it hit the program. SharePoint's tied right in. I kind of mentioned that before, but here's kind of a look at the interface. So right here, you just click on files within your team. Here he's in the marketing team, and bang, there's the folders in our marketing drive. And you can literally just start surfing through them just like you're on your local computer. This is all within Teams. Access to your calendar. So your calendar does pull directly into your Teams so that you can schedule video calls or just work within your calendar right from here. We are expecting to see a full Outlook integration into Teams by the end of the year, where they're going to start pulling in email and other functions. For now, you still do have to go over to Outlook for your email, but they are planning on pulling that in as well. And then finally, you've got your third-party app integration, which we talked about briefly before, but wanted to show you here just to kind of give you an idea of how extensive this thing is. And right there, just on that demo page, you can see some pretty popular apps that a lot of people would recognize, such as Zoom. So, and the last thing that's worth mentioning here on Teams is they have made a massive commitment to this program. And we have run into situations with Microsoft in the past where they release something new, we like it, we start talking about it, we start implementing it, and then they abandon it. So we're always we don't like to be early adopters with Microsoft because we never quite know if this is a fickle project or if this is going to have staying power. I can almost guarantee in all my time working with Microsoft, I've never seen them so invested in a program as Teams. They are pot committed here on this thing, and they talk about it in every single partner release that they give us. They are constantly adding features, and they are constantly committed to placing it directly at the center of their roadmap from quarter to quarter. So this thing may not stay forever, but it is definitely here to stay for the foreseeable future, and mainly because it is such a huge work from home tool. So with everything going on right now, this platform right here gives you a tremendous amount of control over accessing your files, communicating with your team, making and receiving calls, accessing your apps. All of it is all in one place, and it's all included. So it's a big advantage to anybody that implements properly. Now, we've talked a lot about the advantages here, but we would not be doing you guys any favors if we didn't also talk about the limitations. So, and like any platform, it's got them. First, obviously, licensing. This is not necessarily a limitation as much as it is make sure you're working with somebody that understands the licensing prior to implementation, or else you may find that you don't have the right license for what you want to do. Now, again, that's not a big deal because you can move between licenses within a billing period. It's not, they're not locking you in, but it's so much easier to get it right from the beginning than it is to go back and try to fix it. So licensing is something you want to be careful with. It is a little tricky, and you want to make sure you're on top of it. Migrations. So if you're moving to Office 365, you have to get your data in there, and that is going to require a migration. So, and almost all migrations are going to incur some sort of cost. So you want to make sure that when you're planning out an implementation, when you're talking to whoever you're working with, that you're including migration costs as part of your total cost of ownership. You want to make sure that you're not getting sticker shock or getting surprised at having a migration cost rolled in there at some point. So that's a big part of what you want to look at. Internet speeds. So I would assume everybody on here that owns an office has great internet at their office, but none of us work in an office anymore. We're all sitting in an extra bedroom and working on a laptop. So internet speeds have become a bigger problem because not everybody has great internet, and you're only as fast as your slowest connection. So you want to make sure as an organization that you're not abandoning your staff to the whims of their ISP. You want to work with them to make sure that they have good internet, make sure that they have access to a decent speeds. And to Microsoft's defense, they do a good job of offsetting poor speeds, but you're still going to feel it if you're on a terrible DSL connection or a really junky cable connection, something like that. The calling issues, the calling feature is not quite being mature, is definitely a limitation. I would like to see that improve quickly, but I do think we still have at least a year or two until this is ironed out. We also have the backup issue that we discussed. And again, that's easily overcome, but it does require third-party software, so you want to be aware of that. There are limited outages. So now this is something I want to make sure everybody on this call knows. We have seen at least half a dozen outages with Microsoft Office 365 since this work from home thing started. So while it is a phenomenal platform, it is not perfect, and we do have some issues with that. Now they have been becoming less frequent, and I do think in the beginning of the year we saw some outages due to heavy adoption in 2020, and then I think again we saw a decent amount of outages as everyone started working from home and it taxed the system. We have seen that kind of ironing out over the last couple of weeks, so we think it might have been more of a one-off than a consistent thing, but it's worth mentioning as a limitation. Spam and virus filtering. So this one, Microsoft will tell you they have spam and virus filtering on their email. It is just trash. So we can't recommend enough. If you're thinking about going to Office 365, we will always universally recommend add a third-party spam and virus filter just for security. And whatever partner you're working with, you should be asking them about it as well. There are plenty of options. They are extremely inexpensive, but they will save you a lot of headache with and Microsoft's inability to filter spam and to clear viruses out of their email has gotten no better over the last half a decade. So we're not seeing them invest resources in this. They don't care. But they are very easy to work with for adding third parties. So it's an easy thing to overcome, but Microsoft's not going to help you. You got to get out there and do it yourself. If you're still on Windows 7, for shame. No, I'm kidding. It's obviously some people are still on Windows 7, and that's fine. There's no reason that you absolutely have to get to Windows 10 right now, although we do recommend moving quickly on it. That said, if you're on Windows 7, do not go to Office 365. There are a ton of known issues with Windows 7 integration, specifically with SharePoint and OneDrive and some other features, and it's just not going to work. So if you do have Windows 7 machines in your facility or in your organization still, I would focus on upgrading those to Windows 10 prior to talking about going to Office 365, just to make sure you do things in the right order and save yourself some headache. All right. So the real question, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. Look, I'm going to put this in very simple terms. If you're on Office 365 now, you should be working on expanding your scope of integration with Office 365. You should be looking to get deeper in. If you're not on Office 365, you should be working on your planning for getting onto it. And if you don't have a plan to go to Office 365, you are falling behind. So hands down, this is the premier platform for business collaboration on the market right now. There is no competition. There is nobody else that is doing this. Nobody else is offering anything to businesses like Microsoft is offering, and they've done it in an affordable way. So this is a unbelievable value that is very easy to adopt. So we strongly recommend, even if you don't fully utilize it, even if you're just running it at a surface level and just using the email, the apps, and Teams, you're still going to get your value out of it. So there's a ton there. And I think that's it. So let's get into questions. I didn't watch the meeting chat here. I didn't see any pop up, but I don't know if Tyler or you or Phil, are there any questions that were asked throughout this thing?
Well, I do have a few questions here. First question that came up was relating to the add-ons, third-party add-ons. The question was, could those be installed at the organization level and rolled down to individual users? Or is that an individual user install type thing?
Okay. My understanding is that yes, you can do that. Phil would obviously know more about this because he's a lot smarter than me. But yes, you can deploy add-ons via the Office 365 Admin Center. So I think what the question here is, for anybody who didn't follow what was being asked, is let's say an organization uses Zoom across the board, and they know they want their users to have access to Zoom within Teams. Can they just push the Zoom app down to everybody's Teams automatically? And the short answer is yes. I don't specifically know the mechanism for doing that, and if somebody wants to reach out to us to have that discussion, we can certainly help. But yes, it can be done.
Excellent. So another question that came up was, can I use one Office 365 license for multiple users?
Can I use one Office 365 license for okay, you're trying to get me in trouble here. I see what's going on. Short answer, no. You cannot. Now, look, there's a ton of flexibility here in these licenses, and there's probably a ton of different ways that you can manipulate the system to make it do things. But at the end of the day, Microsoft is very clear on the fact that each license that you purchase is for an individual person. It's not for an individual device. I mean, in fact, they give you 5 installs per license. So, if Jane's got a laptop, a desktop, a home computer, a tablet, a phone, she can deploy this on all of those. but it is for her software. Now, if you start handing out your software to other people, you could run into some serious issues. Specifically, those users will be tied to your license. They might have access to your files. There might be security or permissioning issues, and also, you're violating your licensing agreement with Microsoft. So no, we strongly recommend at the price point they're charging, just get a license where needed, and try to keep it straight.
Okay. Another question that came up, and this is relating to domains. So can individuals on different domains access the company's Teams instance?
Okay. I'm going to assume, okay, so what I would say is yes, if you're on different domains and you're in the same tenant. So we've always got the nomenclature that we got to deal with in IT, which is always fun. I guess every industry has it, but we just know ours. A tenant is your organization. So Laughing Rock has a tenant. Within our tenant, we have domains, which would be laughingrock.com, maybe any other web domains that we've bought that might have email, might be crammed in there as well. All of those domains under that tenant are all the same organization. They can all talk to each other. It doesn't matter that one is Laughing Rock and the other one is ABC Company. As long as they're under the same tenant, they act like the same company. And we see this a lot with organizations that own multiple companies, which happens a lot. You get an entrepreneur that owns 4 companies, all of them are in the same tenant. That's fine. For people outside of your tenant, this is truly unique organizations. Again, yes, but with limitations. So Teams is designed to be run as an internal application for collaboration with your team. Anything within Teams can be shared out. So you can make a video call outside of Teams to another organization, but you have to do it as an invite, and you have to, there's steps you have to follow. You can't just click on the call button like you would to a teammate. Likewise, you have SharePoint, which is literally called SharePoint. So obviously it's designed for sharing, but you need to make sure you're sharing out the folders or the files. They're not just going to have access to your SharePoint because security would block them. So you have to actually actively share specific resources with them. But if you do that, it's like any other sharing app. You'll be able to open up a folder. They can drag and drop files into it. They can use it as real-time collaboration as long as you've given them permission to. So yes, you can, but it's slightly different steps than if you do it internally.
Excellent, thank you. So I have a question. I like this question because this is one I hear a lot. So the question is, we use Dropbox. How is SharePoint different?
The Dropbox question. It's not. All right. So anytime you have a specific software application, something that does one thing, like a Dropbox or a Zoom, or something that is a single platform device or single platform software, it's gonna have some advantages. But I would say in Dropbox situation, there is really not much of a difference between SharePoint and Dropbox, except SharePoint does so much more. So everything Dropbox can do, SharePoint can do. It's just different. The interface is going to look different. The way you work with it is going to be different. There's going to be a learning curve. But if you have SharePoint implemented and implemented properly, there is absolutely no need to have Dropbox. It is a redundant application.
Excellent. Another one that came up, and it's almost in the same vein. So it's looking at Teams and Zoom. So how does Teams differ from Zoom for just meetings itself?
This is going to be kind of similar to the last one. Now, Zoom's a little different than Dropbox. I pretty much said that SharePoint's better than Dropbox across the board and get rid of it if you have SharePoint. Zoom's a different story. Zoom does a darn good job. Zoom's a great platform, and there are some things that Zoom can do that Teams can't quite do yet, or not as easily or as well, such as, Zoom gives the ability to give remote support to people and to set up, on the fly meetings with people that aren't even Zoom customers. Teams is a little bit different to work with if you're talking to people that aren't actively on Teams. So you have to invite people. You have to send out invites, have them accept the invites, and then use a link to access the Teams call through their browser. It's a different process in some ways when you're just trying to set up just a conference call with other organizations. In some ways, I really like it. In other ways, I really like Zoom better. But at the end of the day, for 99% of what we use the two applications for, they're going to be pretty indistinguishable. The differences are going to be ones of preference. They both do the same things. They're going to allow you to set up video calls with multiple people. They both have excellent video quality and excellent sound quality. They both allow you to do whiteboarding and custom backgrounds and all sorts of crazy stuff. So there's not a lot of difference from a functionality standpoint, but I will say if you get Teams, don't immediately go and cancel your Zoom subscription. Get used to it first. Make sure it does everything you need it to do because, like I said, Zoom's a pretty good software, and you want to make sure Teams is a good, solid replacement before you commit to dumping Zoom.
Excellent. Now I have one last one here for you. Where does Skype for Business fall within the realm of Office 365?
Yeah, and this here's another area where Microsoft made things muddy. Skype for Business isn't actually really a thing anymore. So the path of that Skype took was it was its own company. Microsoft bought it. Microsoft bought it with the clear intent of turning it into Teams. So they bought it. They then converted it into Skype for Business so that they could add business quality video chat and everything else to the application. Once they got it to that point, they then integrated it into Teams. So the video calling and the voice calling and even the chat features within Teams, they are Skype for Business. That's what that program has morphed into. Now, Skype for Business still technically exists as a standalone program, but Microsoft wants it gone. So, and they are encouraging anybody that's still using it to get onto Teams since it's all the same stuff, but they are technically different platforms. So if you are running Skype for Business, now would be a good time to look at making the flip to Teams. It's not a traumatic thing. We've done it for other organizations, some very big ones. And for the most part, it's pretty much a flip of a switch and a little bit of training. But eventually, long term, Microsoft is going to be shutting down Skype for Business and they're just going to pull the plug on it. So waiting doesn't really make a lot of sense. If you're ready, if you have Teams deployed and you've got some comfort level with it, then switching over to Teams as your Skype for Business replacement is something you want to do. That should be part of your switch to Teams. Any other questions?
That's all I had. I don't know, Phil, did you have any, or anyone else has any questions? Feel free to throw them into the chat.
Nope, I don't have any questions. I think we covered pretty much everything extensively.
All right. Well, then let's wrap this thing up. We're pretty much spot on time here. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for our second installment. We do have our final installment in this particular webinar series, which is next week on the 29th, and that's going to be discussing on-premise technologies. Again, we're always focusing kind of on work from home angles on this stuff, and this is going to hit a lot of things like VPNs and server tools and things that you can do if you don't have access to all the cloud stuff we've been reviewing. How can you mimic some of that using your on-premise hardware? So again, my name is Craig, and with me was Tyler and Phil, and thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a happy and safe Wednesday.